homosexual men. GLSEN is the Gay, Straight, Lesbian Education Network, founded by Kevin Jennings in the late 80s, who was a teacher in Massachusetts. He was Barack Obama's Safe Schools czar. GLSEN is a national homosexual group that targets kids in the public schools and attempts to set up these gay, straight alliances and puts on programs to make kids more comfortable engaging in homosexuality and transgenderism.
And this year, my baby, GLSEN, is turning 18. Thank you.
These conferences are always open to the public. One of our people came and picked it up, actually picked up a few copies.
This was not the first time that shockingly graphic sexual information had been shared at a GLSEN event. GLSEN's annual conference in the year 2000, open to students as young as 14, became famous for what came to be called the Fistgate scandal. During a seminar that was labeled for youth only, one of the speakers, a Massachusetts state employee, actually explained to her audience a deviant sex act known as fisting. In late 2009, GLSEN was once again embarrassed by a revelation concerning sexually explicit material for young people. This time, that content was found in books that were listed on the book link feature on GLSEN's own website. This was for students in grades 7 through 12. According to investigators who read them, the books whose titles were listed on GLSEN's site included materials on sex between children, sex between adults and children, and sex between teachers and students.
Homosexuals are 2% of the American population and are trying to redefine marriage, a covenant that I and the majority of Americans know and believe is between a man and a woman. I will not change my beliefs or religion and sin for a personal choice made by a man or a woman. How dare some try and classify this as a civil right? As an African American, I am disgusted at how loosely that term is being thrown around. Slavery and segregation were civil rights movements, not homosexuality. Homosexuality is not genetics, meaning you are not born that way. It is a choice made. Even pro-gay organizations like the American Psychological Association are having to admit that homosexuality is not genetics. I know a number of people who have come out of this lifestyle and are better off for it and are empowered to lead healthier and more fulfilling lifestyles. Civil rights issues discriminates against who a person is, not who they choose to do, what they choose to do. Marriage is to benefit society, not the romantic gesture of a few. Today we celebrate the birthday of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., one of America's civil rights leaders, and it is very unfortunate that his legacy is being tarnished by current day to reflect an issue he did not support. Dr. King was pretty straightforward when he described homosexuality as something culturally acquired and as a problem. Let's be honest, that homosexuality community cannot be compared to the persecution of those involved in the civil rights movements. It is not only disrespect, but a complete mockery to compare what gay activists and liberal politicians are doing in order to force same-sex marriage on the American people who have refused it and fought against it time and time again. Here's an eye-opener. It is very possible to care for a homosexual person and not affirm in their lifestyle. They do not have the right to change the fundamental foundation of society and mainstream homosexuality as an opposition to heterosexuality.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. I want to first start out by explaining I am against both Senate Bill 38 and also against Senate Bill 708 because I feel why should we open the door to allow same-sex marriage to possibly go through by the vote? I say just stop it here. There's no reason to, give a chance for it to pass. Make no mistake. Tonight, the soul and the future of Rhode Island is on the line. What they are asking for through this legislation, especially Senate Bill 38, is the state endorsement of sinful behavior, the state seal of approval on immoral behavior. And a moral wrong can never be a civil right. Think about it. You can call any immoral behavior a civil right. Polygamy, pedophilia. In fact, just last month, the LA Times did a story on psychologists who are saying that pedophilia is no longer a disorder, but just a sexual orientation. You know where we've heard that before. Now, this is the first step to pushing for civil rights and non-discrimination for pedophilia. Because when you remove God, society collapses. It's a steady decline. And that's exactly what a bill like this does. Now, I want to be very clear that God couldn't be more clear that he is against homosexual behavior. There's so many places, 1 Corinthians 6, 9 through 11, 1 Jude 7, and Leviticus. But Romans 1, 26 through 32, I just want to read part of this. Therefore, God handed them over to degrading passions. Their females exchanged natural relations for unnatural. That means same-sex relationships. And males, likewise, gave up natural relations with females and burned with lust for one another. Males did shameful things with males and thus received in their own persons the due penalty for their perversity. And since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God handed them over to the undiscerning mind to do what is improper. In Jude, they talk about, likewise, Sodom, Gomorrah, and the surrounding towns, which in the same manner as they indulged in sexual promiscuity and practiced unnatural vice, serve as an example by undergoing a punishment of external fire. Now, just to drive this home, Sodom and Gomorrah, they're talking about sodomy. And a bill like this is essentially saying, it is saying, sodomy is fine, it's natural, it's normal, it's healthy, it's a civil right, let's do it, it's wonderful. We want this to be enshrined into Rhode Island law to influence our kids, to take away the religious freedom of everybody whose conscience is against it. And if I could just answer a couple of questions. Earlier said Senator Hodgson had asked about the Catholic charities that were all forced to close. What happened in those situations was that the state of Massachusetts said, hey, this is legal now. You, Catholic charities, and in the other states as well, you have to violate your conscience. We don't care what your religion says. You're doing this. You're going to adopt out to same-sex couples. So they were forced out of business. And Senator Archambault, you had said, what is the remedy for this? The remedy is to not pass this bill, because there are so many other examples, not just florists, not just bakeries, not just the priests who will be charged for hate crimes for reading what I just read you, which is the truth from Jesus Christ. But also, there was a counselor, this is just one example of hundreds, who was approached by a lesbian couple. They said, we have a problem with our relationship and we want you to be our counselor. And she said, I'm very sorry, but that goes against my deeply held religious beliefs, but I'm going to put you right to this other counselor. They were taken right away. The lesbian couple was very, very happy with the service they received from that counselor. Doesn't matter. They still got that first counselor fired. Because once this is in law, like in Massachusetts, it's taught in the schools, and the reasoning is it's law now, and we have to do this, and you're not even allowed to opt your kids out. And the other point, if I could just make really quick, is this. Even if you don't believe in God, because anybody's sitting here saying, well, I don't believe in God, so... Well, do you believe that people should be kept healthy, that it's in the public interest to not promote a behavior, homosexual behavior, which the Center for Disease Control, the U.S. Center for Disease Control says gives you up to an 86 times higher rate of HIV and AIDS, as well as anal cancer, hepatitis B.
I'm just going to ask you if you can start to wrap it up.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. And so this is an expensive burden on our taxpayers, a very heavy, terrible for the economy, because in Massachusetts, after they legalized same-sex marriage, the health costs skyrocketed. And the same thing would happen here. We should be proud that we in Rhode Island are the only ones that have the sense in New England to not have passed something so blasphemous and anti-religious freedom and immoral and unhealthy as a bill like this. Why should we not be proud of that and stand as a beacon of light where people can have safety for their families and their children to not be indoctrinated into this kind of horrible, blasphemous, and immoral behavior? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Young?
My name is Christopher Young. I state that Senate Bills 708 and 38 violate Article 1, Section 3 of the Rhode Island Constitution. The bills violate my freedom of religion. I state that clearly in this hearing because this will, I will seek an injunction against this legislation if it passes. It violates the state's constitution. The legislature knows that it violates Article 1, Section 3. They stated clearly in Senate Bill 708 that citizens believe that same-sex marriage violates Article 1, Section 3 of the Rhode Island Constitution. So this legislature is aware that citizens believe it violates the Constitution. And the very purpose of the Constitution is to protect even the minority position. Even if I am the only one that believes this violates Article 1, Section 3 of the Constitution, it is there to protect my minority position as well.
Mine too.
And Kara's as well. According to court precedent, state constitutional articles stand as statute and the highest law within the state. If you pass these bills, you will violate the state's constitution and state law. There is no federal law that supersedes the state's constitution, so you are violating the state's constitution. You are violating Article 1, Section 3. The Latino community and others have come here tonight, and they voiced their opinion in the rotunda. They're very loud, and they've supported the position that these bills violate Article 1, Section 3 of the Rhode Island Constitution. They've made their positions very clear by cheering to end this legislation. Article 1, Section 3 says freedom of religion. We therefore declare that no person shall be compelled to frequent or support any religious worship. You're making me believe that marriage is the union between two men. Place or ministry. You're making me believe the ministry that marriage is between the union of two men. Except in fulfillment of such person's voluntary contract. Karen and I were married under a religious contract, a covenant with God, according to the Catholic faith, and under our contract with the state. You are changing the terms of our religious contract and forcing us into an involuntary religious contract by changing the meaning of our contract. You are violating Article 1, Section 3 of the Constitution. The Constitution says as well, nor enforced, restrained, molested, or burdened in body or goods, or disqualified from holding public office, nor otherwise suffer on account of such person's religious belief. You are making me suffer on the count of my religious belief to have to come before you continually and defend Article 1, Section 3 of the Constitution, which as members of the judiciary, you should know the law, you should know the Constitution, and you should know that the Constitution acts as a statute and it has the power to stop you from doing what you're doing, but you continue to do it. You are violating the Constitution, and the Constitution further goes on to say, and that every person shall be free to worship God according to the dictates of such person's conscience. You are making me violate my conscience by believing that marriage is a union between two men, two women, or a brother and a sister, according to 708, which says two people can marry. Well, you know, obviously, you guys are attorneys. You know that under equal protection, two brothers, two sisters will try and claim that they are two persons. Why aren't they allowed to marry? So, Article 1, the preamble of Article 1 is based on Almighty God itself. If you attempt to amend the Constitution to provide for same-sex marriage, you are undermining the very premise of the Constitution of itself. You are undermining what the Constitution was created for. It was created for the laws of Almighty God, which are clearly written within the Bible, which says that it is against God's law. You are tricking people into a behavior where they will not have kids. They will not have kids. Two men will not have children. It's a depopulation program. Two men will get AIDS and HIV. According to the Center for Disease Control, they have an 86 times higher rate of AIDS and HIV. I did not do the study. The Center for Disease Control did the study. Depopulation collapses economies, and it is a tactic to undermine the United States government. I would suggest that the state's attorney general investigate Bill Gates and other elite people who want depopulation in this world and file a lawsuit against Mr. Gates for $1 billion for attempting to push an agenda of depopulation and ethnic cleansing. Because just like abortion, in 1973 there was 10,000 abortions a year. Now there's 1.2 million abortions a year.
Mr. Young, I'm going to ask you if you can start to wrap up, please.
Yes. When you normalize and naturalize a behavior such as this, more people will engage in it. And more people will not have children. More and more people will die from AIDS and HIV. They'll commit suicide. This is what happens to people who engage in this behavior. And when this happens, the economy of this country will collapse. More and more people will not have children. It's common sense. It's common sense that it violates my religious beliefs. I've stated it clearly. Many members of the audience who are cheering outside will state it as well. You are violating the Constitution. Both bills violate the Constitution. You cannot proceed forward with this legislation.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Young. Are there any questions or comments for Mr. Young?